So for the last 2 or 3 weeks I was fishing with this rod, which I introduced in my previous video. It is a hollow built double hander bamboo rod. I use it for hucho fly fishing, and despite the conditions being far from optimal, basically the water is super low or was super low and was super clear. Now as you can see it is raining and the waters went up, so basically they are unfishable. I was able to catch fish with it. I have made hundreds and hundreds casts with this line, which is Rio Leviathan 550 grains. I also used some other lines, but basically this was my main line due to the water conditions. And I was using overhead casting, spin casting with fly rod with jig flies, and spin casting with fly rod with light streamers which are soaked with water. And those are basically the 3 main techniques which you use in hucho fly fishing. None of the fish caught was big, mostly due to water conditions, so now when the water shall fall down a bit, I will try it again, hopefully for something bigger. As a result of the previous video, I got a new assignment, so to speak, and I got this rod to test it out. It's Hardy Palacona, number 9, 12 feet 6 inches I believe, and I will definitely make a comparison video between this rod and Radevoy's rod, because those rods, although they are both made from bamboo, are actually very different rods. I don't know if I should be using it for hucho fly fishing, because there are some problems with it. For example, the size of the guides, with the line, which could be problematic for the lines which I use. I also have one Palacona of my own, but this is much smaller beast. This is just number 4 line Hardy Palacona. But as you can see, it's very interesting. The finish on both is actually the same wrappings and so on. So yeah, and this is still one of my favorite reel seats. This is basically this reel seat was used by Hardy, and this is bakelite. This is aluminum, and this is rubber. And they also had such seats on some of their glass rods which I have, and I don't know why, but I really like this seat. Okay, so back to hucho fly fishing and back to Radevoy's rod. So what can I say about it? So regarding overhead casting, absolutely no problems. I mean, it was coping with this 550 grain line without a problem. How can you cast jig flies? Because jig flies for hucho are quite big. They are 20, 30, 40, even 60 and more grams, especially when they are wet, with a bamboo fly rod. And the trick is actually very simple. What you have to do is you don't move the rod fast like when you're making spin cast with spinning rod or casting with casting rod. But you actually have to accelerate it slowly, and in this case you can cast heavy streamers because the rod just bends like it would bend under the fish, and you launch this jig fly or streamer in the form of jig fly far away, of course far away for a fly rod. And same goes when you're basically using spin cast for light streamers. In this case, again, you have to be gentle, not only not to overload the rod, but also because what you're using now is the weight of the water which is trapped inside the streamer, and you don't want to push this water out with a quick jerk. So I was also using it with other lines, with sinking lines, and also with some other tricks. Perhaps I will make a video about fly fishing for hucho and for pike. If you're used to bamboo rods, there is nothing that you're going to miss with the bamboo rod that, for example, you would have with which one? For example, this one, which is a modern graphite rod. This is number 9, 13 feet. So basically one of my hucho and pike fly rods, comparable to this bamboo rod. What are the downsides of using a fly rod? I'm going to say a fly rod, or in this case a double hander, not a bamboo rod, because this is basically something that is in common with any kind of double hander. Either it is made out of bamboo, out of glass, or out of graphite. For example, this rod here, which I already showed you, which is number 9, or this rod here, which is number 10, 14 feet long, have exactly the same problem. And this is when you're fishing against the current. So basically you're throwing your streamer against the current. And what this creates is, if you would be in calm water or in slow flowing river, this would not be a problem. But when you're in a relatively fast flowing river, the problem is that when the current is coming towards you, and of course this current separates into a lot of smaller currents which are going in all different directions, and then you also have eddies. This creates a lot of curves in your fly line. And when fish grabs your streamer, and hucho has quite a big grip on the streamer, you know, bam, it bangs it, and it has a lot of small teeth in its mouth which basically sink into the streamer. And example, those are big bushy things, juicy things, you know, something that it looks at and say, okay, this is worth swallowing, and it runs up and goes after it. But when it grabs it, and when you strike with a fly rod, there is not enough pull or force on the streamer to actually hook the fish. And the reason for this is very simple, because when you strike, the vast majority of this strike goes into moving this line, into trying to straighten this line here. And basically this absorbs the biggest part of your force, and it is not unusual, for example, even to see a hucho, and when you strike it, and then you see it just open its mouth and the streamer falls out. So this is actually one problem which is in common with all fly rods, especially with double handers which are longer. Of course, we could debate here that bamboo rod is softer than a graphite rod. So in theory, a graphite rod should transfer a bit more force to that fish. But when you're talking about rods which are basically of comparable line rating, I cannot say that there was much improvement, for example, when I was using this rod compared to with bamboo rod. To solve this problem, I actually developed this rod. Now that's a whole different beast. This is actually a carp rod which I transferred into a double hander and could plenty of huchos with it. So this is basically my go-to hucho rod for big waters, for big fish, fast currents, deep water and so on. So this is what I basically ended up with in the end, and I just made or improvised those handles out of bottle stoppers, or I guess in this case those are more like barrel stoppers, but anyway, that's how it was made. So, and the other drawback, which is again common to all fly rods or to all double handers, in this case I'm talking about double handers, is what you're going to do when you get the fish close to you. For example, now you have a 10 kilo fish down there on something that is basically a long wet spaghetti, and this goes also, for example, for this number 10 14 rod, 14 feet long rod. That's also wet spaghetti, because when there is a 10 kilo hucho on, it just needs to shake a little bit and the rod will just bend and the hook will be 2 meters away from you. When you're using a single-handed rod like this one, of course this would have to be a strong rod, not number 4, but basically you just do this and you stretch this hand here, and normally you can reach it by the gill cover and it is yours. But when you're using a double hander, the rod is much longer, and what happens is that when you're trying to grab the fish, of course the fish is swimming away from you, for example 1 meter away, 2 meters, so it's really hard to get it to you. And instinctively you start doing this. Basically you rotate the rod, and with this of course you lower the angle between the rod and the line, and what this creates is a lot of stress on the tip, and of course this ends up in rod breakage, bang, and you're without the rod. And this, for example, is something that happened here. For example, in this case, see, the tip went first, and then the shock from breaking the tip went all the way down the rod, and you see what happened here and here. So this is actually the second double hander which I destroyed on hucho, and I also destroyed one single-handed rod. Well, I'm not going to say this is a downside. This is actually a great thing, but it will create some problems for you until you get used to it, and those are bamboo joints. This is actually the part which you would say that it is the most critical part, and I was worried that the rod would start coming apart here and that I might break it, because this is the problem with double handers, that basically due to a lot of stress which is induced on joints during casting, they separate. So some people glue joints and so on. But in this case, this was absolutely no problem. Those joints are super firm, not even the slightest mark of them coming apart. Actually, they are so firm that they create a problem for you. It's hard to put them apart. I was talking with Radivoj, because he was here around a week and a half ago, and he also noticed that basically the problem with bamboo joints is not how they hold, the problem is how to get them apart. But this problem was easily solved when I developed this thing, that I basically just put the rod between my thighs, and I pushed on this with both hands, and after that it was no problem. And why is this important in hucho fishing? Well, in hucho fishing you're covering a lot of water, and some locations where you fish during one sessions can be kilometers apart. So basically this means that we break down the rod and we assemble the rod many times during hucho fishing, and that's why this is important. Okay, so this is about this rod. So what did it catch? The first thing which it caught was actually a big chop, and then it caught huchos. There were also fish, there were missed strikes, which is normally in hucho fly fishing, there were fish falling off and so on.